Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm your host, Tshepo Modiba. Joining me tonight on the show, Gerhard le Roux, Africa sales trader at Imara Africa Securities. Gerhard, interesting discussion today, specifically focusing on Nigeria and the energy crisis there. Certainly when I have been reading about this over the last few days, the first thought was, shoo, more bad news, hey?
Absolutely. Good evening, Tshepo. I think Nigeria has been hit after the elections with a couple of headwinds, and this being probably for a business person in Nigeria, definitely the most serious. We've seen 29 days of effective stalemate where no one is really budging in the fuel crisis.
Right. Now, what this properly means is that the country has come to close to a shutdown, right? I think some of the stats are 80% of petrol pumps are empty now. The likes of MTN and a few of the service providers in Nigeria have released statements saying that they're a couple days away from shutting down their networks, which is particularly alarming.
Yeah. These companies are really in trouble now. Effectively, the systemic lack of electricity in Nigeria has effectively meant that if you want to start a large-scale business in Nigeria, you're effectively reliant on generating power.
Right.
What that obviously means is you're also reliant on the diesel that goes into those generators.
Right.
So in a company-specific level, as you mentioned, MTN, basically they use the diesel generators to have their base stations up and running in the remote sort of regions of Nigeria, and that's really sort of where it's starting to hurt. It sounds like some of the smaller operators in Nigeria have already experienced shutdowns as a result. It pretty much is a catastrophe when it comes to a business level.
Right. Now, if we step back from, I guess, the immediate crisis and look at it, I guess, from an investment theme perspective, it talks to, I guess, some of the challenges that come with doing business in the continent from a lack of infrastructure perspective, especially from a power infrastructure perspective.
Absolutely, that is exactly what it comes down to. It just really makes those lack of basic infrastructure just stark in investors' mind and also in the business's mind. How do you compensate for these sorts of scenarios? How do you make sure that your business is still generating revenue even when faced with a crisis like this? Right. It's a very difficult thing for managers and companies to manage.
Which probably then leads to, it's probably a little bit easier for the bigger multi-managers, the likes of multinationals rather, the likes of MTN to cope with this type of scenario because they've got the balance sheet to take it on. Probably a little bit harder for smaller companies to cope or penetrate the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Mentioning the telecommunications providers, they're really the cash generating businesses in very, very many African economies. And just to move down sort of to other businesses, manufacturing, banking, we've seen that these are major significant players in the Nigerian market, basically having we had Guaranty Trust Bank earlier in the week say, look, we can't keep all of our branches open. It's really negatively affecting us, and we've had to close it down. When it comes to the very low ends of the market, that's where it really starts to hurt, because if you don't have electricity, you can't keep you can't keep your frozen goods frozen, you can't keep your cool drinks cold, and you basically lose your competitive advantage in the market, and it's really hurting small business, I think, more than anyone else in that economy.
Now, how does, I guess, let's put on our positive hats, if we may, and assume, and there's been talk of a resolution being found today. Let's assume that actually happens. Do you think, or can you see the economy recovering back to some sort of normalized growth?
Absolutely. If there's one thing the Nigerian market is known for is absolute resilience.
Right.
So I think once the flow of diesel comes and petrol comes back into the economy, things will sort of come back to normal fairly quickly. I think there's been a bit of posturing around both politically with the incumbent as well as with the suppliers, sort of very used to getting their government subsidies to increase volumes in the fuel sector. So using that as I think with the incumbent president sort of using that as a mechanism to really make sure that things stay as they know it.
Sure. Interesting dynamic where you have quite a bit of this uncertainty or turmoil happening in this interim period, right, where the new government hasn't quite taken over and the old government is still in charge. Interesting to see how that dynamic plays out politically going forward.
Absolutely. I think there's some real systemic problems that Nigeria has tried to fix in the past. Unsuccessfully, especially the fuel subsidy. I think it was in 2012 where there were significant deaths within Lagos itself when the government basically blanketly pulled the subsidy and then subsequently went back not as high as it was before, but sort of gained a bit of ground just at the expense of very many lives. With the lower oil prices at the moment, you can imagine that the Nigerian government can look at this as an opportunity to basically take back a bit of the subsidies that they've been giving over the last while. If you consider that the Nigerian economy is not gaining as much income from the oil as they used to.
Sure. Now, again, we touched on it a little bit, I guess, the influence of the poor infrastructure on a business level. I hate to hop on one company over and over again. Like, MTN suggested that up to 70% of their costs are actually fuel costs. Surely this means that at some stage for the Nigerian economy to thrive, you're going to need some sort of infrastructure program to roll out some sort of efficient energy policy.
I think businesses in general had a really nasty wake-up call in the last month with the effects of the fuel shortages, and on the back of that, you would imagine that proactive cashless companies like MTN, like the banks in Nigeria, would want to make sure that they are not placed in this situation again. That come any situation that they're still able to generate revenue within the economy, and the business is still able to run well. Because if you do that successfully, you not only secure your revenue lines, but your customers are also happy as a result. I mean, at the moment, to switch off large portions of the effectively the Nigerian cell phone network because you don't have fuel to do it, you'll have some really unhappy customers. And if you solve those problems, obviously it's a very difficult one to just say, okay, well, we have to roll out infrastructure within Nigeria.
Right.
But I think it's everyone will have to come back to the drawing board, really reassess where they are, how to really respond to these not necessarily eventualities, but these sorts of scenarios.
Right. So it puts a spotlight on just how dire the situation could potentially be. Now, that probably means that from a business perspective or an investment theme perspective, if you want to call it that, one or two industries will probably prop up to take advantage of some sort of solution around this.
Yeah, I'd imagine they would. The amount of refined fuels that Nigeria imports, I think it's something that the economy just cannot afford, and with it
doesn't make sense.
Absolutely, with the massive amounts of oil reserves that the economy has to support 160 million people with fuel, you really imagine that there'll be sufficient refining capacity to drive that. So this is something I think that the state really needs to look at. President Buhari, when he's coming into office, I think he might not take such a lenient stance on what has happened over the last while. I think to an extent Nigeria has been embarrassed a bit by the standoff and by effectively infighting over payments.
Now, I mean, it's not something that's unprecedented to see an area where Nigeria has been a net importer then become self-sufficient. I mean, cement is a great illustration of just that. So again, it's not all necessarily bad news for the Nigerian economy.
Absolutely not. And you know, there's some unmatched industrialists in Nigeria. I mean, to see the empire that Mr. Dangote has been able to put together. This is exactly the sort of heavy industry that he's made his mark on the Nigerian economy for.
To emphasize the point, some of the hospitals are running off these generators, and if you run out of power at a cell phone place, it's quite something. But if the hospitals start running out of power, it's even more dire. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the outlook for Nigerian economy is bleak in totality.
Oh, not at all. The 160 million consumers progressively getting included in the economy. Obviously, these sorts of situations really just show that Nigeria has a long way to go, but there are significant positives within the economy. And if the gap between sort of the infrastructure that's currently there and where Nigeria is going, if this whole crisis pushes everyone forward towards that, it would not be wasted.
Right.
That's the old adage: never waste a good crisis. I think this is a prime opportunity for Nigeria to not only reevaluate their fuel subsidies, but also look at the infrastructure to make sure that the likes of your crucial key portions of the economy and healthcare and the like not be left without any options in an emergency.
And hopefully tap onto the new president and hopefully have a policy situation that matches industrial demand for infrastructure.
Absolutely. It's sort of slow teething problems really in a country that's really sort of starting to come to its own. And we will see these things happening in the future, I'm sure, not necessarily fuel crisis, but there'll be something else just as the economy grows and sort of expands and really sort of comes to grips with itself. I'm very bullish on the future of the Nigerian market. There are more and more consumers coming and joining in the formal economy every single day. It's been a significant expander for foreign companies coming into Nigeria. Nigerian companies really using that as a base to go into the rest of the continent very successfully. As you mentioned before, the Dangote Cement is a prime example of how you can really do this very successfully. So yeah, I imagine that this would be a wake-up call, but I really think that the long term is looking good.
Thanks to my guest, Gerhard le Roux, Africa sales trader at Imara Africa Securities. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter, that's at Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. For myself and the team, goodbye.